A very warm welcome to our Made in China podcast. And today we have a first time connection directly to the West Coast, to the US, to California. Our guest in California, sitting with a nice background of the University of California, Berkeley, is Professor Slav Hermanowicz. Professor Hermanowicz, a very warm welcome to our podcast.
Thank you very much, and I am very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. We spent together a bit of time in Shenzhen just 2 weeks ago, and that's how this connection started.
That's true. And we will talk about this later, what happened in Shenzhen. And as we heard you saying before, you're very looking forward to the 3 quick icebreaker questions we prepared today. So Damian, let's start.
Absolutely. Warm welcome also from my side. If you could speak a new language perfectly right away, which one would it be?
Oh, that's the difficult one. Can I combine 2 languages?
Yes, please.
Because I know a bit in each, and this would be German and Chinese.
Oh, wow.
That's actually the perfect combination. We love to hear that on our podcast. Yeah, great. So,
well, I know quite a few, but these 2 are the weakest part. German better than Chinese.
Mm-hmm. So let's see if we will have the opportunity to talk in one of these languages later in the podcast. But now we first want to know from you, which season do you like best and why?
If you think about here home, it's late October and early November, because the weather is best. It's not too hot and we don't have rains yet. In California, we have seasonal rains, so they all come in pretty much in winter. And there is an anticipation of Thanksgiving, which is for me a very big holiday. And then later, all the Christmas parties, New Year parties. If I can choose a season, this would be winter, and I would love to go to Altai, which is a skiing resort in Xinjiang. I saw a lot of movies from there, and I actually have some friends who come from that region. So that would be something to do.
Yeah, that's a very good choice. Outdoor and skiing is a big business also in China and still has a lot of potential. It will just grow bigger in the next years. And we already talked about it. We met in Shenzhen. I have a roughly idea what you do, but you have a long career between cultures, between worlds, between industries, I have to say. And for those who don't know you yet, who are you and what are you doing today?
Well, okay. I am a professor now, professor of graduate school at Berkeley. I have been at Berkeley for 42 years. So it's a long career working primarily in the environmental engineering area, environmental biotechnology, water quality, and more recently, sustainability, engineering sustainability, and energy transition. But that's kind of a big span of time. So I will start from the most current things, and that is related to my contacts with China. For the last 9 years, Berkeley and Tsinghua had a joint venture, a joint research and graduate education institute, and was a very unique enterprise based in Shenzhen at the university town. And this was a joint program with about 500 engineering students, graduate students, and about 70, 80 faculty. And I was started with I was one of the founding professors to create this program. And I was for quite a while, a translation from Chinese would be vice dean. So that's my very strong connection to Shenzhen. I spent a lot of time every year there. But my Chinese connections go back probably about 25 years. Let's put it this way, since you mentioned the Pearl of Orient Tower in Shanghai, when I first went to Shanghai and it was my first visit to mainland China, the Pearl of Orient was the only tall building on the Pudong site.
Yeah.
And then this was a job I was asked to join the team of my American colleagues and what became now Chinese friends to remodel, reevaluate Shanghai chemical industrial park, which is one of the first, maybe even the first, and probably still the biggest chemical park, very close to Shanghai. And that's how it started. And then I had a very strong collaboration with top universities, Tongji in Shanghai, Tsinghua in Beijing, Harbin Institute of Technology. And then I was so honored and very pleased to receive one of the 1,000 Foreign Experts Award. So I was working with my Chinese colleagues for about 25 years. But I also had European connections. I grew up in Poland. I got my first degree in Poland, and I got my PhD in Canada at the University of Toronto. And then Berkeley hired me. So my son says I am a lifer. But I had, by my count, pretty good experience abroad. I lived in 6 countries, and I define living as being there at least a year and working there. Mm-hmm. So as not a tourist. So I had very strong connections with Austria a lot. I was one of the first distinguished Fulbright chair at the Bodenkulturuniversität. This was in sustainability. So I spent quite a bit of time in Vienna and then in Innsbruck, but also France, Spain, and so on. So that's essentially my kind of career. You know, professors can talk about their CVs forever, but let's talk about something substantial.
25 years between Europe, China, the US, it's a very unique perspective, and I'm very looking forward to hear more about it. So when you came to China for the first time, it was totally different to the China that's now. I also saw, like, I came to China in 2007 for the first time, and from your perspective, how has China changed during that time as an engineer and educator from this point of view?
Well, as you notice, China changed tremendously and at a very rapid speed. And I think this is something that very few people who had no experience or didn't watch China really understand how big transformation happened and how quickly they happened, and they are still happening. So in my area, the environment was really tragic. Air was polluted. You could barely breathe. Everybody wear masks and so on, especially in winter. Beijing was phenomenally dirty. Shanghai, maybe a little bit less, but also. The same happened with water. Water was very polluted. The so-called black water rivers were pretty much everywhere. And I, in a way, understand this because I come from Poland, and after Second World War, where Poland was destroyed into the unimaginable extent, Poland was rebuilding their industry and so on. And as a little example of what the attitude was, the largest Polish banknote, piece of paper, had a picture of a factory with a smokestack spewing clouds of smoke. Why? Because it was progress. It was goal to be achieved. And only later, the emphasis shifted to environment, quality of life. And exactly the same happened in China, except it happened very, very fast. So specifically in my area, when I came, there was just a start, perhaps, of a very intense process to build infrastructure to tackle environmental pollution. And in the area of water, that meant building treatment plants. These treatment plants were based really on the Western U.S. technologies, based on U.S. textbooks. The plants were funded, a lot of that were funded also externally from other sources. And they were built and they served their purpose. But what's happening now is, in my area, China has most advanced treatment plants, so-called membrane bioreactors. And this is the area that I personally worked in quite a lot. They have more of those plants than whole world combined. And as a result of that, most of the rivers were elevated from the category 5 or 4, which is the lowest one, to 2 and 3, and some even to category 1 in terms of clean water. So that was an amazing achievement. But that's perhaps not as visible, although, people love to see rivers and so on, but everybody sees air pollution. And that you went through this as well.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you an example from Shenzhen. And this is because I was very marginally involved in this, but I observed that how the whole city of, let's say, 18 million people, 20 million, depending how you count, transformed a public transport system from diesel buses and internal combustion engine taxis to electric vehicles, and also pushed the private cars into electric vehicles. And for many people that may seem, have not been here meaning Shenzhen, that may seem like some kind of exaggeration, but I'll give you one data point, which is an anecdote. It's not really an anecdote. When I was in Shenzhen, I took an equivalent of Uber to our conference, and that was in the evening rush hour. So for 35 minutes riding in a car, I counted exactly 12 non-electric cars. 35 minutes, 4-lane streets, 12 non-electric cars, and none of them were Chinese. There were BMWs, there was a Mustang, Cadillac, and so on. So you can see how that changed the air quality tremendously. And now you can see blue sky. And more importantly, younger people are not even amazed. They take it as normal. Yeah, the sky should be blue. So this is really an amazing achievement that China accomplished. In the terms of education, I think there were few very big changes. One was that when I came, I saw some statistics that China was graduating several 100,000 college students, college graduates, which for the country of that size, it's a minuscule part. Now it seems that the graduation rate or the percentage of that cohort that goes to universities is somewhere closing on 65-70%, and in actual numbers is 12 million. That created an enormous expansion of university education with enormous increase of educated people in various areas. A lot of that in STEM, that means science, technology, engineering, and math, but also in other areas. And I think that's something that is without any parallel. In a way, we saw that in other countries, Western countries, United States as well, where we had, particularly in 1960s, 70s, and a little bit 80s, an expansion of this university education. But China did this on a scale that is unimaginable in a way. The quality also of students changed because now you have what I would call not a students, particularly in engineering, particularly my area of engineering, are not students who can design treatment process from textbooks, but they achieved what I would call a systemic competence, which means they can look at the whole system. And that also includes people who are now maybe in their 30s or early 40s. They can look at the whole system. They can look at creating digital twins of the system, analyzing it, optimizing with the help of AI, and implementing these solutions in the real world. So this is something that China is perhaps now a leader in terms of global benchmarks in this area, and also very much pushing international standards in this area. And that is a very challenging process for everybody. So that's essentially, the big picture. There, of course, there is a challenge here. And I think the challenge is very similar to what we see also in the US, and that there is a very large group of educated people who invested their time and money, and their parents invested time and effort and money to become graduates finish universities, and they have perhaps problems finding jobs that reflects their expectations. And this is what's happening here. Whether this is good or bad, it's really hard to say, because on one level, on a societal level, this is good that we have a more educated, more aware society. But also on the individual level, when you spend so much time studying, I don't know, and I don't want to be facetious, art history. I love art. I would like to be an art historian in my spare time. But jobs in this area are not many. So you have that huge frustration. And I see this in China as well. Now, please remember when I say I see it in China that I am still a foreigner, Lao Wai. I don't speak Chinese except for just maybe 100 words and mispronounced completely. So I am kind of peeking inside the beautiful Chinese tent rather than being inside and trying to see it out. So you have to keep that in mind, that my reflections are my personal reflections based on what I see, what I hear. I have a lot of friends in China. I read a lot of materials, both in European languages and translation from Chinese, but I'm not an expert on China. And the saying is that the more you know China, the more you are baffled and puzzled about its issues, problems, complexities. So that's what I would say in a general term. Competence of students increased tremendously, and granted, I mostly dealt with the top level students through these premier universities. Their kind of viewpoint change. They take many things as normal, internet connection or computing capacities and so on. And that seems to be overall will be a very interesting situation. What happens next? I know that Chinese government is planning now a big redesigning universities. We have a lot of problems in the US with universities and education as well. So we will see if we can maybe learn from some Chinese experience in that.
Yeah, fantastic. And now you have just, as we said, you've been to Shenzhen, you are in California. Silicon Valley is not far away from you. And if we think about the US and Silicon Valley, we always think about startups, new ventures, unicorns whatsoever. How does the way people start new ventures in China differ from what you see in the US or Europe?
Okay, so this is a question from a bit of a side observers. We had a startup in China that failed, but that was quite a few years ago. So my experience from that time are a bit dated. Things change a lot. Specifically in Shenzhen, what is very impressive is the very tight connection between the startups, the production, and financing and implementation. I think this is a unique place if you are interested in hardware-oriented products or processes. Because, first of all, there is a famous Shenzhen speed, Shenzhen Sudo, okay? And that's not a misnomer. This is still there. You can order your prototype and get it done in maybe a day. You can get parts delivered in 30 minutes, and you can have your product tested, say, by a water utility, maybe next month. So something like this. So you have this very concentrated supply chain. You have the local governments. And frankly, it is not only Shenzhen itself. It's the bigger, Greater Bay Area, GBA, which is the area that spans from Hong Kong, Macau, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and all that Pearl River Delta. And you can, the joke is that you can design something in Shenzhen, find finance in Hong Kong to have, Series A financing, have your hardware made in Dongguan, and then install it in Guangzhou, and then go and celebrate it in Macau. I'm not depreciating Macau, please. No, so this is a very unique environment, hardware-based. There are a lot of accelerators there, and this is, two that I know personally is the Inox Academy. I was in Shenzhen in May, and we had a relatively short visit to Inox Academy that was started by Professor Li, Zhixiang Li. I was very impressed what kind of range of products their startups are making. I also visited, and that was already a little bit in the past, Hacks. They had this nice place in the Huaqiangbei district where you could actually go. That was another amazing story. Sorry, digression, but it was another amazing thing that you could walk in that ginormous buildings, and there were little stands so specialized. So this stand had only resistors, but any kind of resistor you can think of. And this one had diodes, okay? And if they didn't have it, either it didn't exist or they could probably get you in 30 minutes. So those incubators, they are different, I think, and this is again, as an outsider, they are different from top world-class accelerators or incubators, such as, say, the Y or Berkeley Skydeck, which provide enormous help to startups, but they do not have capacity to give you today, quote, on, say, an injection mold that you need for your product. So I think that's a one big difference. In one way, there is a lot of similarities. There's a lot of people who see themselves as entrepreneurs, and they see themselves entrepreneurs because they see their friends, their colleagues, there's somebody that they know as being entrepreneurs. There's obviously a desire to be very successful entrepreneur, okay? And they are willing to put that as their passion, really passion, because you don't become a unicorn in 3 months, although that speeds up these days. So that's sort of my take. But again, I would suggest that you talk to people like from Inox. They will give you much better detailed picture on it.
Yeah, and we met very close to the Inox office in Shenzhen, actually downstairs just, and we participated in a panel on AI and productivity. And for me, it was very interesting to hear your impressions about this, because most people nowadays, or a lot of people nowadays, think AI is just ChatGPT helping you to write your LinkedIn posts, but AI is so much more. And you also did some kind of research in it, or you're watching this very closely on how AI is driving innovations and how it will improve and influence the way we work today. So what do you think? How will this change the way on how we will work in the next years?
To start with, I think there is a lot of hype with AI. And that reminds me the .com era, which you may remember, where if you put something like E before the name of your company, this was an enormous success. So now it's an AI. But realistically, I think it is really a revolutionary period. What we see in particularly my area is a combination of sensors and AI-based models, and I use this term very loosely, that will allow for both optimization in the design process, but also much better control and optimization in the actual production, if I can use the term process, in the actual facilities. So you can think about networks of sensors that are already embedded, but will be even more embedded. And the problem is kind of twofold. One is that with the sensors becoming so much more available and so much more reliable, And this is all kinds of sensors for physical parameters, temperature, pressure, but also, for example, for human presence in a room, or for the development of some microbial flux in the biological processes and so on. So with this proliferation of sensors, there is a need to kind of grab all this vast amount of information that is beyond human capacity to deal with. So you can put this in an AI model, and that's not really perhaps even the like large language model. It is a specific model, and this is happening now. This is happening in production. One prime example are robots. The mechanical parts of the robot, as far as I know, and I actually been to two companies. I've seen Optimus. It was not a company, but at a show, and I've seen UBTech robots. And then I saw another company that does hardware or like a warehouse robots, and they ask not to mention their names, so what it is. And this is all extremely impressive. But with the humanoid robots, the mechanical parts are pretty much very well advanced. I mean, you could see them dancing and doing flops and such. But how do they handle day-to-day tasks, whether it is in the store, in some kind of a treatment facility, treatment plants, or at home? And some of that is already impressive, but you need to have a combination of those two factors, mechanical and software, AI. More than software, it's just the models, also theoretical models of how this should be working. One thing, and I mentioned that in our panel, is that you will need a lot of data if these systems are supposed to recognize patterns. An example I gave is Tesla car, which is I actually drive. Mine just got the version 14 full self-driving. And there was first versions of Tesla self-driving software and hardware were based kind of on the following the rules. Here is the book of rules, okay? If it is a red light, you need to stop and then look at the traffic and then you can turn right. And that worked, but not very well, especially didn't work in extreme cases. So Tesla changed, I think 2 generations ago, they changed to pattern recognition, looking how people drive and how they avoid or not avoid, and that's worse, accidents or some critical situation. And that improved tremendously. But the data they release is that they based that development on 6.3 billion, that's with B, billion miles. And this is, I did the calculation, that's 67 times from Earth to Sun. So you can see the need for data. That need will be absolutely necessary, for example, in medicine. If you have a normal case of flu, the software can diagnose this probably quite well without any big problems. But if you have a case of a disease that is rare, maybe 1 in 10,000 people or 1 in 100,000 people, how do you deal with this? So that's, I think, is going to be a big issue. So I'm not sure if this is following your question, but I take the liberty as a professor to move.
Very good. No, very good. And as a professor, what should universities focus on today to prepare the next generation of engineers, or also actually other people studying other subjects, for this rapidly changing landscape of AI?
I think that is a question that we are all struggling, and I think it's not only universities, but also other enterprises. And you can think about lawyers, you can think about accountants, you can think about investment bankers, you can think about medical doctors. What really we need is, in terms of engineering, we need probably 4 things to deal with. And that's one is, I'm not sure how to phrase it, data science, but we don't want to teach or develop data scientists. Okay? What we need is people who can understand where data science comes from, machine literacy, and understanding what algorithms can do now and what they cannot do reliably. That's a very big item. Second one, since engineers are supposed to build things, or at least develop some things to be implemented, we need to have a good process to teach them rapid prototyping and understanding supply chains. I think this is very important for engineers, particularly now where we can see global supply chains being interrupted. So what happens if you cannot get something? And it may not be just because of politics. You know, when the Fukushima plant blew up, the story is, at least what I heard, that car manufacturers in Japan could not paint cars with a particular color. Why? Because the only supplier of the pigment for that color was in Fukushima, and the plant was shut down. All right? So maybe you don't need a red car, fine. But the engineers need to understand the complexity of the supply system, okay? And also they need to understand how to evolve, how to make changes on the very rapid scale. They also need to have an ability to work in a very diverse, multicultural teams. And that's not really the sort of issue of some kind of a woke ideology. It is simply a fact that they will be working with people across the world or across the regions. The Chinese engineers will work with Indonesian engineers or Malaysian or, I don't know, American and so on. So they need to have that grasp of teamwork and understanding and certain degree of, I think, humility would be helpful, understanding other people. But also I would put a need to understand sociology, understand the society, maybe even psychology and history, because the solutions that they will develop and the solutions will be put into practice will depend on social acceptance, and also they will be influenced by non-engineering players, very often decision makers, a city mayor or a congressman or a president or somebody like that. And they need to understand how to explain their solutions, their problems to people that deal with other issues. You know, there's an engineering trope that it would be much better if all people were replaced by robots, but that's not going to happen. So that's why engineers these days have to have those basic understanding of machine learning, data science, building things real time and making changes, and also understanding the society that these solutions will be implemented with. Of course, they need to have a grounding, very solid grounding on basic science. So they have to know math, physics, chemistry, biology. This is, by the way, I became an environmental engineer because I was attracted to this field, because in my undergraduate and graduate studies, I actually studied both the hardcore engineering, like structures, that was a part of civil engineering, but also biology, chemistry, math, physics, some electronics, not too much, but so this is sort of the image I have for future engineering students.
So, and how do you think, as a short question for the ending of our talk, how will your work, the work of your students, all these technological developments shape our society and our lives in 10 years?
Okay, so in my professional area, I see a possibility of tackling very large environmental issues. And it's not only the climate change, which attracts a lot of attention, but personally, I think there is a number of other problems. For example, groundwater depletion. And this is something that very few people realize what's happening. But if you go to Shanghai, you see the buildings are sinking because groundwater is being depleted. In China and also in the US, in Texas, so-called Ogallala Aqueduct and aqueducts in Central Valley in California are being depleted at a very large rate. So I hope that combination of better sensing, better sensors, controls, and creation of new water through desalination using renewable energy will be, a solution to this, to many places. China, the northern plains, India and Pakistan, obviously Middle East, and so on. But I also think that we will all see a much bigger invasion, if I can use this, and I use this term specifically, of AI solutions, personal assistants, or robots, or other devices. And that will create, in a bigger society, challenges. There's always some uncertainty or fear or concern about new things. And that's historically happened when new technologies were introduced. But now we are seeing these new technologies being introduced in the society-wide range. It's not only people who produce textiles and they were threatened by mechanical looms. This is like everybody. And the question is, what about privacy? What about losing jobs? And there is actually a little bit aside to this, which I want to finish with, and losing control. At the panel, we were together. I mentioned that my Tesla has synchronized. I allow it synchronization with my calendar, and if I have an appointment somewhere where there is a location, and I get into a car, the car drives me to this location with one push on the screen, literally, because it knows where I am going. I asked how many people would like to have that solution in the audience, and there was only 2 hands that showed up. So that's a big thing. One last thing that we should really very be concerned is the potential lack of skills in the new generations of workers. And what do I mean by this? If you think about, let's say, lawyers. I know lawyers quite well. I used to work with them as an expert witness in patent cases. I'm very impressed how they do it. But junior lawyers spend normally tremendous amount of time going over very convoluted, very detailed documents. And they were trying to understand what the case is, what the evidence, and what the solutions are. Now, if we outsource that work, primarily for financial reasons, for speed reasons, to AI, or if you have an engineer that used to do a lot of calculations even by hand, because this was the only way to do this, or at least you could get some approximation of the solution. Now this is all outsourced to AI. First of all, how do we know these solutions are true? And that requires experience and judgment, which doesn't develop all by itself. So if we lose that new generation of people that don't have experience and skills, I'm not sure how well we will travel, unless, of course, we absolutely rely on AI and we say, computer said that. That's, by the way, from my engineering experience about 30 years ago, when computers were started to be used to do calculations. And the question was, well, it must be right because computer did those calculations. And the advanced experienced engineer look at those structures, a truss, and say, no, this is wrong. These forces cannot be like this. So that's what worries me. But overall, I am very optimistic because I think we'll find solutions, and I think we will see personal robots. I would love to have one. And we'll see also maybe metaverse agents. Wouldn't it be cool?
Yeah, very, very cool. So
That'd be cool.
I think it's Very good ending, optimistic, but still risk averse to what's waiting for us in the next decades. And we are very glad that you shared your experience and your opinions with us and sent many greetings to California, to Professor Hermanowicz. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you, and good luck with your program.
Thank you very much.
I'm looking forward to listen to more of it.
Absolutely. Hope to see you very soon in China or the US.
I would very much like to go and see, and if you are here, let me know.